To the Tauranga City Council. My name is Gary Paul, Chief Executive of the Council, and tonight we have with us two elected members, Mayor Greg Brownless and Councillor Larry Baldock. The role of elected members tonight is to listen to the conversation. Questions tonight will be answered by officers, not by elected members, and the elected members wish to stress that their presence here reflects the fact that they are fully informed about the issues we're going to discuss tonight, and they're fully informed about the issues relating to Bella Vista development. You'll notice in the room that we have quite a few cameras. These are not television cameras, they're cameras so we can broadcast this meeting to other homeowners who cannot be with us tonight. There's a homeowner in Australia, some in Auckland, and others from around the country. So that is the purpose of the cameras. We also have in the room tonight media, in the form of three print journalists representing Fairfax, the Bay of Plenty Times and Sun Live. What we've said to the media is that they are welcome because we want to operate in an open and transparent way. But tonight is your night, and it is your night to be informed and to answer questions and get answers from us. So what we have said to the media, what we have agreed with the media, is there will be no questions from the media tonight, and they can have their turn tomorrow. With me tonight, I have Kirsty Downey, who is leading our project team responding to the issues at Bella Vista. We also have geotechnical and structural engineers and a building expert who will talk to you tonight, together with our legal advisor. We know that this has been a very, very stressful time for yourselves, and we are tonight wanting to give you all the information that we currently have. We have not got all the information we need to make decisions moving forward, but we want to keep you as well informed as we possibly can. In terms of our drivers, our first concern and our first driver is your personal safety, then the safety of your property, and how we move forward and work out a resolution and a solution for the situation that you face. I would, in closing, and before I hand over to Kirsty, what I would like to do is thank you all for your cooperation over the weekend, and we look forward to working positively with you to resolve the issue that you face. So thank you, and I'll now hand over to Kirsty.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who I haven't yet met in person, I'm Kirsty Downey. I'm the General Manager of the Chief Executives Group here at Tauranga City Council. Some of you have received a call from me or an email from me over the last few weeks. As Gary said, we really do appreciate you coming out tonight and meeting with us. I especially want to say thank you for your understanding since we advised you of the need to evacuate you from your homes on Friday afternoon. As you know, we had intended to meet with you before the end of March, once we had completed comprehensive assessments of the properties within the Bella Vista development. But unfortunately, the forecast cyclone event that was due to hit Tauranga on Monday brought everything forward. And when we received advice about the need to evacuate, we had to act with urgency. Tonight, we're going to provide you with a short presentation. We're anticipating that will take about 30 minutes. And then following that, there will be the opportunity for owners and for residents to ask questions. I'm going to ask that those are directed through me, and then I'll ask the appropriate member of the team to respond. We're hoping to finish by 8 o'clock tonight. We don't necessarily have all of the answers to your questions, but we're going to do our very best to try to answer everything that you ask of us. We're going to be open with you. Some of the information that you're going to hear and see tonight is going to be hard-hitting and it's going to be confronting. As I said, we don't have all of the answers and we're still working through completing technical assessments. and scoping some of the options to move forward. When we get to question time, I'd like to ask you to be respectful of your fellow residents and also of the professionals and staff that we have in the room. So if we can talk one at a time and let people finish, that would be much appreciated. As Gary mentioned, we've got people joining us by audio conference from Australia and other parts of New Zealand, and they too will be provided with the opportunity to ask questions. We've provided to you by email yesterday to the owners the engineering reports, structural and geotechnical engineering reports, and we've got hard copies of those for those of you who don't have them at the back of the room. We'd like to invite you to reflect tonight on the information that we've shown you and talked to. And tomorrow there will be an opportunity for you to direct further queries and questions through me. If you've got questions about your temporary accommodation, we can help with that tomorrow also. Now I'd like to introduce our team. We've got a dedicated team who've been working on this project, and I'd like to introduce them and have them stand as I do so. So to my immediate left is Nathan Spear. Nathan is a compliance lawyer with Rice & Co. Next is Colin Jacobson, who's a structural engineer with BCD based in Hamilton. Sitting next to him is Mike Trigger, geotechnical engineer with ACOM based in Hamilton. Next we have Rose McLaughlin, who's a technical building expert who was formerly at Auckland Council, prior to that with IANZ, the former Department of Building and Housing and former Building Industry Authority. And next to Rose, someone who may be familiar to many of you, Laurie Hubbard, who was a principal building officer working in our building services team, but who is currently seconded to working with us on this project. Just to outline what we want to cover off in the meeting tonight, we're going to provide an overview of the current situation. We're going to detail the reasons why the Chief Executive issued a warrant on Friday afternoon requiring you to evacuate from your properties. We're going to have the experts talk to their initial observations, and we're going to outline what this might mean for you. So turning now first to the current situation. This is an extraordinary situation where the developer, Bella Vista Homes, went into liquidation at the end of November 2017. At that point in time, the homes were in varying states of completion. Some owners took possession of the homes prior to completion and prior to the issuing of code compliance certificates. Of the 21 properties within the development, we believe that 3 CCCs have issued. In early February, we began a comprehensive assessment, and our focus at that point in time was to identify what work was required in order for the incomplete homes to become compliant with the New Zealand Building Code. Involved in that assessment, we've got technical building expertise, structural and geotechnical engineers. On Friday morning, we received structural engineering advice that 3 of the buildings, which are incomplete and are at framing stage, were identified as dangerous and requiring emergency works. Later in the morning, this was expanded to 21 properties. The urgency was the forecast cyclone Hola. On Friday morning also, we received geotechnical advice that we were immediately required to evacuate 21 properties. We had to act quickly, and it was on the basis of that professional advice that the Chief Executive issued a warrant under the Building Act. We acknowledge that you were provided with little time to pack up your belongings and evacuate your homes. Some of you heard from us directly, either via email, people on site, others of you heard indirectly. We acknowledge that this created a huge amount of uncertainty and anxiety for you all. I've been asked over the last few days, why did you evacuate us on Friday when the cyclone wasn't forecast to hit the Bay of Plenty until Monday? And the reason for that was that our structural engineer advised us that the emergency works that were required to be undertaken on those 3 dangerous buildings would take 3 days to complete. And also, we needed to ensure that the sites were secure and that further entry would not be able to be undertaken, and that securing the site also would take some time. Now I'm going to hand over to Nathan, who's going to talk to you about what dangerous buildings are. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Kirsty, and good evening, everyone. I will be very brief. I'm just going to outline a couple of the important legal definitions which is going to frame tonight's discussion. The first one up on the slide there is from section 121 of the Building Act, and it is a dangerous building. Dangerous buildings concern danger to not only people, but also property. And site works, so site works is defined as part of the definition for building work, and therefore site work can be dangerous. So escalating things is immediate danger. And this definition comes from section 129 of the Building Act. Now there needs to be an immediacy to the danger for this section to be triggered. And in the case that we're going to talk about tonight, that immediacy was the forecast cyclone Hola. And as Kirsty mentioned, and which will be discussed further, the council received expert engineering advice on Friday morning, and that was the basis for the warrant that was issued by the Chief Executive at approximately midday on Friday. Kirsty.
So now just to detail the reasons for the decision that was made on Friday requiring you to evacuate by 8 o'clock on Friday evening. Council received and relied on expert engineering advice. At all times, your safety was our primary concern. It's fortunate that Cyclone Hola, it didn't hit with the intensity that was forecast, but it could have, and we took that seriously. Council's decision to evacuate on Friday had two components: structural and geotechnical engineering issues. And I'd now like to hand over to Colin Jacobson, our structural engineer, who will talk through structural issues first. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Kirsty. Just to recap, my name's Colin Jacobson. I am a structural engineer with BCD Group and based in Hamilton. And we were asked by the council to undertake an urgent inspection of the dwellings in the Bella Vista development. I completed an inspection on Tuesday the 6th of March and prepared a summary report to council. This report was issued to council on Friday morning, and it's probably best if I just refer to the summary there, and I quote, "We note there is a gale force wind warning for the Bay of Plenty region on Monday the 12th of March 2018. We recommend urgent remedial works to connect the lintels to the studs and the studs to the floor to prevent the roofs lifting under the forecast high winds. This requires the missing connections to be installed." Following on from that, we looked at the houses in general, but more specifically to the dwellings on 303A, 305 and 309A, because these are the dwellings which were unlined. The reason that we looked at these in more detail is that the bones or the structure of the dwellings are visible, and we could make a quick assessment as to the level of construction and how significant any issues might be. So as a bit of a background for a dwelling, you generally consider the occupancy or gravity loads which act vertically, and the wind loads and the earthquake loads which act horizontally. As these three houses were incomplete and unoccupied, of these three load types, the wind load was considered the critical issue that could have caused damage to the structure and the adjacent dwellings. The initial inspection identified numerous structural defects which were categorised in the BCD report issued on Friday the 9th of March. the ex-tropical cyclone, which the weather forecasters were predicting would come through the Bay of Plenty on Monday, Tuesday, could have gale force winds and heavy rain. The preliminary calculations that BCD completed indicated the gale force winds could induce enough uplift forces to damage the upper levels or the roofs of these 3 buildings. On Friday morning, we decided that the 3 buildings were classified as dangerous and urgent repairs were needed to be carried out to prevent the roofs potentially lifting under the forecast high winds. We advised Council that we expect these urgent works would take approximately 3 days to complete in their normal course of events. I understand that Council arranged for a local group building company who provided significant resources at very short notice, and the works were completed on Friday. I will now sort of outline some of the common defects we identified in the 3 dwellings that we had access to the framing. So photo 1, this shows the joist hanger which connects the joist via the steel bracket to the beams of the walls. In this case, nails are required to connect the joist hanger to the beams, and in all of the cases we saw in the 3 houses, there were never enough nails to make sure this connection was safe. I observed multiple cases of this problem throughout all 3 of the underlying dwellings. The next photo, photo 2. This is a view looking underneath at one of the beams outboard from the garage doors. You might be able to see on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the photos just a small black dot. Well, they're pre-drilled holes in the flange of the beam, and into these holes are supposed to be steel bolts inserted which clamp the steel beam to the timber floor above. None of the steel bolts had been inserted, and so the floor was not connected to the supporting beam. In my 30-odd years as a engineering professional, I've never seen such poor workmanship. Photo 3. This is a view of an external wall, and it shows the lintels, which are the small beams sitting over the window and the door openings. The lintels are connected to the timber studs either side. The studs need to be connected to the lintel with steel straps so that we can transfer the roof loads down through the lintels and the studs to the floor. In all the cases that we looked at on the 3 dwellings, none of these connections were present. And so the consequence of that is in strong winds, when there's an uplift force on the roof, unless the lintels are correctly connected securely down to the floor, there's a risk that the roof can lift off. Photo 4. This is a similar detail of what I've discussed in photo 2. Again, we have a steel beam supporting the floor. In this case, the floor is sitting on the top flange of the beam, and again there are small pre-drilled holes in the top flange of the beam through which steel bolts are to be inserted to connect the floor to the beam. Once again, there were no steel bolts tying the timber floor to the steel beam. Our concern, obviously in this case, was that the first floor was not connected to the lower level. So in strong winds acting on the side of the dwellings, or in an earthquake, there is a potential for the building to disconnect. The final photo here, it shows the typical view of the roof plane bracing, which is the steel straps running on the roof plane down to the top plate. Put simply, the roof needs to be connected to the top plate of the wall for the bracing to work. In the 3 houses we inspected, the bracing had not been correctly installed, and this would result in damage to either the wall or the roof trusses under high winds or earthquake loads. In summary, all of these structural issues which we identified drew us to the conclusion that these 3 buildings were dangerous and required urgent works, which were completed by the council on Friday. And finally, I am a CPEng engineer and a chartered member of Engineering New Zealand. As part of our professional obligations, I am bound by a code of ethics to identify any dangerous or unsafe building practices and ensure immediate action is taken. In this case, I therefore advise Council of my concerns regarding the 3 dwellings, and urgent structural repairs were undertaken to repair the defects. Thank you, and I'll now hand you back to Kirsty.
Thank you, Colin. So when we received that advice on Friday morning, we determined that we needed to act with urgency. So we invited Peter Cooney from Classic Builders to come into council and meet with us. The reason why we approached Classics was because we identified the need to bring in large-scale resource so that these works could be undertaken expeditiously. I'm able to confirm that Classic Builders completed the work by the close of day on Friday, and remember I earlier mentioned that our structural engineer had advised that that work would take 3 days. I'm going to hand over now to Mike Trigger, who is our geotechnical engineer from ACOM. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Kirsty. Good evening. My name is Mike Trigger. I'm a chartered professional engineer and accredited as a Category 1 geotechnical engineer by Tauranga City Council. I'm going to talk you through the background to this recommendation that you can see behind me. ACOM started working on this project last week and undertook inspections on Tuesday and Wednesday to plan our approach for addressing the Council's concerns around geotechnical, civil and traffic engineering at the site. On Friday morning, it was apparent that multiple weather forecasters were forecasting a cyclone to come towards the Bay of Plenty on Sunday night or Monday. There were sites that had been identified as concerns prior to Cyclone Gita in February, and I agreed with those concerns. Cyclone Gita, as you know, was forecast to go across the top of the South Island. Prior to Cyclone Gita, a number of emergency stormwater controls were installed on the sites. I inspected those stormwater controls during moderate rain on Wednesday and noted many were ineffective. One of the concerns is the unretained slope and how it could behave in either intense or prolonged rainfall events. Tauranga has a history of landslides. In May 2005, over 2,000 slips occurred, with a number resulting in flows of slipped material. As we are in an early stage of our assessment, we are not currently in a position to assess the risk to each individual building. Although some of you have code of compliance, the geotechnical risks can be from works beyond your property. In addition to this, there is clear evidence of subsurface erosion on some of the sites. This presents a risk because we don't know the extent of the subsurface erosion throughout the development, and surface collapses may occur. In considering the risk during Cyclone Hola, I also considered that the site will change during a rainfall event, and particularly at night, the changes will go unnoticed. Therefore, it was my professional opinion that the sites met the requirements of being immediately dangerous. Like Colin, I am subject to the Engineering Professional Code of Ethics, and it was my duty to notify the council so that you, the owners and residents, could be kept safe. This is a photo taken in November 2016 during normal rainfall. Before your houses were built, you can see some surface erosion and a circular slump on the upper bench of the excavation. Other such slumps have occurred within the site at various times. This photo was also taken in November 2016. You can see the scale of the earthworks that have been undertaken on this site. What we don't know is how much fill has been brought into the site after the excavations to create the platforms. You can see erosion channels in the slopes in this photo also. This is a photo that was taken yesterday. We have an unstable slope above masonry walls that aren't fully backfilled and below a residential dwelling. I consider this situation dangerous in the terms of the Building Act. We have engaged a surveyor to undertake a full topographical survey of the current site conditions so that we can work towards solutions for the stability of the sites. This is a recent photo showing a surface collapse that has been caused by subsurface erosion. This collapse is approximately 1 metre deep and 800 millimetres wide. We do not know how many more of these are within the development. Based on these two conditions, the slopes and the subsurface erosion, it was my opinion that the development and all of the buildings are dangerous, and with the forecast cyclone, they were immediately dangerous. We have engaged a geophysics specialist to start undertaking subsurface investigations with ground penetrating radar and shear wave velocity testing, and we expect this to start on Wednesday. I want to now give you a brief overview of some of the other engineering issues that we have identified. We are concerned that some of the driveways, such as the one in this photo, are not functional for on-site manoeuvring and may be unsafe. AECOM's traffic engineer will be providing an assessment of this in due course once the survey has been completed. A number of the completed drainage works are not functional. This photo is one of many examples where surface water flows bypass sumps and strip drains. AECOM civil engineers will be auditing the as-built drainage systems for capacity and functionality. This is an example of piping erosion below the pipe in the trench. That the trench has not been constructed properly. If unchecked, this has potential to cause voids such as the one we've shown you. This will form part of our civil and geotechnical reviews. In this photo, there is insufficient supporting ground around the building foundations. Extending the supporting ground will surcharge the retaining wall. AECOM will be providing the Council with recommendations on this issue. This photo shows a significant issue which affects many of the properties in the subdivision. The photo shows the backfall behind a masonry basement wall. The first thing to note is that the control joint has not been sealed. The second thing is that the panel drain has been placed against the wall. The drain is facing the wrong way. It has been fixed with penetrative fixings. The joint in the panel drains is in the same location as the unsealed control joint. The polystyrene block appears to be a drainage polystyrene, but this is yet to be confirmed. However, it has not been protected from the soil with a geotextile fabric, and this is critical in preventing material entering the voids of the polystyrene and preventing poor water pressures on the wall. It is also critical as part of the moisture protective system. A number of properties have retaining walls with this block system. In this case, you can see the wall does not have a foundation and the walls have not got the required reinforcing steel. AECOM will be providing comprehensive recommendations on this and all issues in due course. You'll appreciate there are quite a number of properties and quite a number of issues. It will take time. The slides I have taken you through today demonstrate the basis for my conclusions on Friday that all 21 buildings were immediately dangerous under the Building Act. Thank you. I'll pass you back to Kirsty.
Thank you, Mike. In this slide, we talk about our initial advice. So you've heard from the structural and geotechnical engineering experts. I referred earlier to a property-by-property assessment being undertaken with technical building input. When Rose McLaughlin was engaged in early February, the focus of her work was to identify what work was required to be undertaken to ensure that the properties that had not yet been issued with code compliance certificates could be made compliant with code. That assessment is ongoing and we're expecting the cataloguing to be complete within the next 2 weeks. Whilst we can't go into a lot of detail tonight, we do want to share with you some of the initial advice, and as I said earlier, we want to be as open as possible. What we can tell you tonight is that there are a number of issues that have been identified with the properties assessed so far. These include ground and structural issues. Now I'm going to ask Rose to come forward and to talk through an overview of those for you.
Good evening. My background, for those of you that don't know me, I'm 30 odd years in building control, specialising in the regulatory environment. What that means is I've worked processing plans, doing inspections and certification aspects of building. So as Kirsty said, I started working on site on the 2nd of February, and I've seen a lot of you as I've walked around the sites, investigating your buildings, taking photographs, talking to you. This particular photo up on the screen now is up at Anita Way. So some of you may not have been up the top there, but this gives you an indication of how steep the slope is at the top of this hill. Obviously there's a lot of water runoff coming down this driveway, and although there are cesspits at the bottom of the driveway, it would not catch all of the water that comes down in heavy rainfall. And in fact you may see some of that water shooting off the edge of the driveway, a little bit like a waterfall. There's also a lot of grassed areas either side of that which water runoff occurs at as well. In this slide what you're seeing is you've got 3 Anita Way at the top there, an unsupported cut of about 3 or 4 metres. That cut is partially protected with geotextile fabric, but every time it rains that erosion is a little bit more each time. So I'm now looking along the back of the site, and again that's number 5, the blue house up the top there, on my left, and on the right hand side are the properties in Lakes Boulevard. The timber is an indication, that piece of timber that's laying on the ground is an indication of some cut that has been done. So during construction, a block wall, which is out of sight of this shot just on the right, was erected. The dirt was dug away, the wall was had a tanking membrane applied, and then it was backfilled. In that backfill you can see quite a bit of construction debris. There's geotextile fabric, bits of timber, bits of steel, bits of plastic. You can also see a little bit of erosion. So apart from the retaining wall that is necessary between Anita Way and Lakes Boulevard, the individual houses on Lakes Boulevard also need retaining walls. So they need to be along the length of the sections and across the sections in between each property. And they are necessary to ensure that the ground does not erode any more than what it currently is. This is a close-up shot of the area between, I think it's 307 and 305, and you can see that there's been a significant amount of scouring of the land and erosion. You can also see up the top that crevasse or that opening that we mentioned before, where the subsoil erosion is occurring. We're just going to talk briefly about the floor slabs. So you may have heard the term raft floor slab. So a raft floor slab is constructed using polystyrene pods, and you have a series of those. They're about 1 metre square. They're laid out over the building footprint. Between those pods there's a gap of about 100 millimetres, and in between those gaps you'll have reinforcing steel and concrete. So that's how your slab is formed, and it is actually critical when that slab is formed that it is placed on a compacted platform which extends 1 metre beyond the building footprint. So if you look at the picture up behind me, the top one would show where the building footprint is on the inside, and then the 1 metre perimeter on the outside. The bottom picture that you can see up on the screen is a cross section, so we're cutting through the slab now, and if we had our 1 metre perimeter, which we should have, and then the safe slope that is required for these slabs to remain structurally sound. Now if we look at this picture up on the screen now, just behind Laurie, up on the top left hand corner, is a floor slab which doesn't have that 1 metre perimeter. Now I could have taken this photo on any site. It's pretty indicative of what's happening on all of the sites. So it doesn't have that 1 metre perimeter which it needs. You can also see in the foreground, just where Laurie is standing, the footings for one of the block walls, which has also been undermined as a result of both earthworks that have been carried out on site, but also because of the erosion, so the water and rain washing down the slope, and you can see some of the cracks that are forming under and through the ground. So we don't know what's happening underneath this ground. Now this is a close-up photo of that footing that we were all just looking at. And we have talked about subsoil erosion, so what's happening underneath the ground that we can't see. And this was one of the areas of concern. And I could have actually put my arm into that hole. I didn't, but I could have. And so there are areas under driveways and other parts of the site that have these subsurface erosion that, why we are concerned. That's just another look at that foundation again. And you can also see from this picture the 1 metre that has not been achieved out from the slab in the background there. Now I'm looking on at the back of one of the retaining walls, and Mike has already talked to you about the application of the tanking membrane and how it needs to be protected before it's backfilled. Now the tanking membrane will break down if it's exposed to UV and sunlight. Some of these membranes have been put on some time ago, so they've been exposed to that light. They've also been subject to erosion and silt, so a lot of the dirt and stuff has got in behind, which is actually causing damage to that membrane. Now on the next slide you will see that water is actually coming inside the block walls. Now it's absolutely imperative that water doesn't come through those block walls, because this is a habitable space inside, and it is actually very, very, very difficult to stop water from the inside out. You need to get that preparation and application of the tanking membrane right to ensure that the house remains watertight. At the base of these block walls, so we've looked at the tanking membrane, we've looked at protection measures and the polystyrene. So at the base of the walls we have drain coil. So drain coil is the black plastic drain. It has perforations in it, and in the ordinary course of events what would happen is the water would dribble down through the metal drainage and hit this drain coil and then be carried off to a cesspit or sump. If you don't protect that drain with geotextile sock and you don't put proper fill in behind that drain coil, then the drain will block up like the picture up there is showing you. So that is part of the reason why some of the drainage on site is ineffective, is because it's blocked. This is another picture showing a little bit of erosion and subsurface movement. Now we have seen several places on site where services have been exposed. In this particular case we've got no support of the drainage pipe, and what we have observed on this site is that in amongst the backfill is a lot of construction material, bits of concrete, bits of polystyrene, bits of material, and just general construction waste, which is obviously not a good product to be putting back into the ground. Driveways, we've touched a little bit on driveways, and it's fairly clear that with some of the driveways it would be very difficult for you to get out of your garage up the driveway and then drive out onto the road. On this particular site, so I'm standing at the bottom right hand corner of the garage, and to my left is the front door. What this next photo will show you is some of the some of the surface water that's coming across the site. So we talked about surface water coming down. We also have it coming across the site. So in the next picture you can actually see what happens if you don't have adequate drainage. That water's fairly high and it actually hasn't drained away at all over the last week or so. So these are the sorts of things that we are looking at. And I think that's my last slide.
Thanks, Rose. So now we are going to talk about what this might mean for you. And we absolutely appreciate that what you've seen and what you've heard is hard-hitting, it's confronting, it's going to add to the uncertainty that we know you're already experiencing. This new information creates further uncertainty and anxiety for you. We've got a dedicated project team who are committed and working hard to find a way forward. As I said earlier, we certainly don't have all of the answers at this point in time, but we've received feedback and we're wanting to be as open with you as we can be. We're looking at options and we're trying to do that as quickly as we can. We've had experts on site today and we're going to have them back to site tomorrow. And the purpose of them visiting tomorrow will be to determine whether the site is safe for you to return. We'll then be better informed to advise you on timing for reoccupying the dwellings. I want to acknowledge though and give you a heads up that timing may be different for individual properties. At this point in time, tonight, we can't give you a definitive time frame. What I can give you is an absolute assurance that we are working hard and with urgency so that we can provide you with information as it comes to hand. Now that brings to a close the presentation part of our meeting, and I did say at the outset that we have about half an hour for you to ask questions of us. If you can direct them through me one at a time, recognising that we also have people who are participating, who are not here present at the meeting, but who may want to direct questions to us also. So if we can just be respectful of each other, direct your questions to me one at a time, and I'll then ensure that the response is directed to the appropriate member of our team.
Well, bang it out then. I live at 311. Just what you said about the foundations, like never mind the retaining walls and all that. If it isn't built on strong, it's not going to last. So all these things, how did these get any further when the foundation wasn't even done right? Who's ticking these boxes? Somebody has to be held responsible. I do not feel safe in my own home. I worked 3 years, 7 days a week to get that home because we couldn't afford a home in Auckland. Let's move to Tauranga. Let's live the dream. Well, the dream is shattered, and nobody's thinking it. Everyone's just looking at me, and I'm living in some hotel. It is not fair.
Okay.
You shake your head and everything else. It's not fair. You know, it's not. So I go back home and now I live in a house at the foundation, so right off the top, how am I ever going to sell my house again? How? Somebody tell me.
So in response to the questions, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Look, we understand that this is extremely difficult, and this is your home, your livelihood, your sanctuary. We absolutely get that. And we're trying to be as open with you as we can be, and we're saying we don't have all of the information, and tonight is not about laying blame. We acknowledge that moving forward there are going to be lessons to be learnt here, and we'll be looking to address those. But what our primary focus is at tonight is ensuring that you and your families and your homes are safe. And at the moment, based on the expert advice that we have, your homes haven't been safe to occupy in advance of the cyclone arriving. We are fully committed to completing this property by property assessment to identify what the issues are with the ground and with the structure for all of the homes within the Bella Vista subdivision. We appreciate that you've been taken out of your homes, away from your security, away from your belongings and your home comforts, and you've been placed in temporary accommodation. And for some of you, you've had to move multiple times already within the accommodation venues that you've been put in. Some of you have been asked to move today. We are looking at, we advised you to be prepared to be away from home for over a week. And we're looking at ensuring that we've got accommodation for you to the end of this week, and we're looking out to next week. But we are committed to making sure that we can provide you with up-to-date information as it comes to hand. I know that doesn't make it any less, or the impact any less, but we are committed to working with you, to finding solutions so that you can have a satisfactory outcome at the end of the day. This is a really unusual and and unique situation in that we've got work that was required to be undertaken prior to completion, and we had a developer who went into liquidation at the end of the year before completion. But absolutely, we want to work in partnership with you. We don't want to be working against you.
We're all in the same boat here. We all want the same goal. I want to live in a safe house. You have, when you see things like that, I don't ever feel safe going back.
Absolutely understand your concern, and we too are acting on expert advice, which is why we took the action that we took on Friday and why we've been treading cautiously to ensure that we bring in the appropriate experts who can best advise us as to what the issues are with each of these properties. Okay.
So let's say, like, I know you guys have having pressure and all that. Thank you for trying to accommodate, and I do appreciate that. You know, I'm not a total wet bag here. You know, I do appreciate it. I am thankful that I'm not living in my car. You know, so thank you for that.
Can I just say that I think all of us would appreciate that presentation, what we've actually seen, and appreciate that the council wanting to fix things. I think what's weighing on our minds is how did it get to that point when there are inspections that are happening along the way, and then that is what's worrying. What I wondered was when it was showing those other houses that had incorrect things done and bolts missing, stuff like that, that could have been that the work didn't carry on from that point. But do we have any assurance that the inspections that we had on our own houses, I'm in Anita Way, and a house that's built, that things were checked well enough to know that the actual house is sound?
I'm going to respond to you, Deegan, and then I'm going to go to Andre with the next question. So tonight's not about blame. I've said that already, okay? We don't know the answers to those questions because we're only partway through completing the assessment. So what we're committing to you is that we want to provide you with information about the safety of your homes. In order for us to do that, we need to rely on our technical building expert, our structural engineer, our geotechnical engineer, the imagery that's going to be undertaken on site this week, who can actually look at what's happening in the ground and under these houses, so that we can then be fully informed and come to you with options as to the way forward, okay? And we're committed to making sure that you are kept informed every step of the way. We acknowledge that perhaps that hasn't happened in the best way that we could have previously, but since pulling this team together, which I'm leading with the support of the Chief Executive and our elected members, we are fully supported to ensuring that owners and residents are kept informed. Now, sorry, Andre, you had a question.
So the other day when we had our conference, so I asked a question about the retaining walls, whether they were consented. Now the reply was that they were not consented at all. Now I've got here the consented plans from my property that have an approved stamp based on these engineering reports from Manctillo with the wall types and structural. I don't know the technical terms for them, but I wanted to know, to clarify, that these stamped plans are saying that these walls are not consented.
So we're not going to be able to talk about property by property tonight.
Okay.
What we're going to be able to talk about at a high level is the current situation, the issues that have been identified so far, and the proposed way forward. But certainly, as you leave the meeting tonight, you're going to reflect on the information in the structural engineering report and in the geotechnical engineering report, and there's going to be the opportunity in the coming days for you to direct queries directly through me, whether that's by phone, by email, or in person, whatever's going to work best for you. In terms of the retaining walls that were required across the back of the development site, absolutely, they were a requirement that they were to be erected as part of the development. But look, we can talk with you individually about individual properties. As I say, we're still gathering information, so we can certainly, happy for you to field your queries through me, and we can talk about what information we've got to date, but we're only partway through the process.
Okay.
Hi, my question is also about the retaining wall, because you've identified that that's one of the issues as to a safety feature on the entire lakes, or the entire lakes and Anita Way. All of the back properties were consented for those retaining walls, except for the last two, because they didn't need consent at the time. I've been through with the engineers and with book retaining, so I actually do know that, and I've seen all the consented plans, so I can answer that question. Yes, they have all been consented. My question is, we were told by council to go ahead, have the property surveyed, so we could then look at fixing the retaining wall, because moving forward, shouldn't fixing the retaining wall be our number one prerogative? Because that should be our priority, because once the retaining wall is fixed, a lot of these draining issues can actually then be fixed. Why are we delaying this? Because I have actually done everything that council has asked me to do. I've had a survey done of all 8 properties. I've had the site levels done. I've had them re-engineered. I've then had a retaining person. I've had my engineer go back. It's gone to Mike Trigger. He's come back with a whole heap of questions. We've actually answered all of those questions. So why are we now still waiting?
Okay, so thank you, Janet. In terms of the question that you asked, when we first started looking at this, the number one issue was certainly the cut and the slope at the rear of the development site and the need for retaining. But as we've further progressed our assessment, we've identified structural issues and further geotechnical issues that have been shown to you tonight. So what we're wanting to do is ensure that we've got a full understanding of what all of the issues are, so that we can identify possible solutions and come back to you, the owners, with those. We are not wanting to be obstructive and further delay things. As I said, we are wanting to proceed with absolute urgency, and we're wanting to do that with you. We're having to rely on expert advice to assist us.
Your expert advice.
Okay, so your point's noted, and we can further discuss this. I've got a question here that's come from one of our non-attendant property owners, and the question is, how did my house get a code of compliance if these issues are so bad? So in response to that question, the issues that we've given an overview tonight demonstrate structural issues in respect of 3 dwellings that are incomplete and that are at framing stage, and further structural engineering assessments are required in respect of the other dwellings within the development site. We've also shown you an overview of geotechnical issues relating to the site. We are still in the process of completing the site-by-site assessment of the building compliance issues. We don't know the answer to the question, as to be quite frank, and we're trying to be as open with you as we can be tonight. We don't know, but we're certainly in the process of informing ourselves so that we can better inform you. So as I said during the presentation, the cataloguing of issues that Rose is undertaking is expected to be complete within the next 2 weeks. And we've got our structural and geotechnical engineers who have been engaged and have been instructed on the basis that this is going to be prioritised and treated with urgency. We're absolutely mindful that people are currently out of their homes, that includes owners and residents, that in itself creates a significant amount of anxiety and uncertainty, and we're needing to ensure that we respond so that we can inform you as to the way ahead, and we're looking to be able to further engage with you this week once the engineers and other experts have been back on site.
Sorry, just another question is, how come it's taken about 96 days for Tauranga City Council to actually impact and make these decisions since the liquidation of Bella Vista?
So in terms of the Bella Vista liquidation that occurred at the end of November 2017, action was taken following the liquidation, and that there were notices to fix that were issued. Council, though, that's one part of Council's role, is to be a regulator. but we acknowledge here that, that only gets us so far, and that people in this development have been left high and dry by a developer with incomplete building work. We need to work with you. So we took legal advice in December about how to proceed forward. So notices to fix were issued. We've then formed a dedicated team, which first came together in February, and we've added to that team over the last month. So we are absolutely treating this with absolute urgency, and our Chief Executive has absolutely committed to ensuring that the team is properly resourced so that we can prioritise this and inform you and act as quickly as possible.
So our last notice that we had, so the cyclone before, we had a similar situation where we got an email within hours before Tauranga City Council, obviously, it was in another emergency procedure with the last cyclone. So we got an email saying that there was an emergency procedure happening based on geotech advice. Now, why wasn't that geotech advice that has occurred now not happened back then, as well as why was work stopped from WorkSafe for Tauranga City to comply or do anything with those properties, and yet all of a sudden we're able to put builders inside these properties to fix certain areas?
So let's deal with the WorkSafe prohibition notice first of all. So that was issued in October 2017 by WorkSafe New Zealand, a central government entity quite independent of the council. And what that prohibition notice provided was that there was to be no works undertaken within 2 metres of the slope. So the works that were required to be undertaken in respect of the 3 incomplete buildings on Friday as emergency works, those works were outside that prohibition zone. Council was in contact with WorkSafe New Zealand, who understood the work that was required to be undertaken on Friday to ensure that those dwellings were made safe. In terms of the prior emergency works that were undertaken prior to the arrival of Cyclone Gita on the 19th and 20th of February, we acted on geotechnical advice that was provided to the council at that time. So that advice was that we required interim emergency works in the form of stormwater control works, and they took the form of dams, Nova coil and sandbagging. In terms of the geotechnical assessment that has been undertaken on Friday, that included previous engineering advice and also advice that was taken in advance of the cyclone.
Hi, I'm Colin here, 307. Couple of questions and thoughts to add. You said you started your comprehensive review in February. We got advised a bit later on, and the initial estimate would be the end of February that you would be finishing, and then you'd get back to us early March. Then I met with you personally and others a while back, and it was mid-March. Now we're talking the end of March. I suppose I just want to make it clear for for yourselves, a lot of us are sitting here with nearly completed buildings, with mortgages that we're paying, and so every week is costing us a lot of money. So the money I have to fix the problems you're going to tell me about is disappearing with every week that we are delayed. So my capacity to do something goes, since December, some of these issues, we went around with council building inspectors looking at some of those issues. They weren't all pointed out to us at the time, but many of them were visible. Like, my house is the one with that exposed piping. That happened because there was no downpipe in at the time, and we had severe rain events over time, and so we've got temporary downpiping in, so hopefully that exposing of the pipe there is now not going to go on. But you've got those sorts of issues happening. So I think, my heart, I haven't had to move out of my house. I live in Auckland, so my heart goes out to all of you guys who've had to have your life turned upside down again, and feel a great compassion. But I could be wrong in speaking for them, but I think our big concerns are the future. I think they can live with where they are, but it's how we're going to pay for this. Is it really our responsibility? you're hearing those questions. Why weren't these things picked up at council building inspections, And because that's when they should have been picked up, And we don't really want to hear, well, we'll deal with that later, because our big concerns that keep us awake at night is, how am I going to pay for this?
Can I respond to your questions, Colin?
We can pause and I'll come back to more.
Great.
So in terms of the timing, yes, we did indicate that we expected to have the
Cataloguing complete well in advance of where we are now. And
the reason that it's been
delayed is because we've discovered issues that extended beyond the initial scope of works. And so I said that Rose, when she was initially engaged, was identifying what was required to bring these properties to code. And obviously you've been shown an overview of geotechnical and structural issues and other compliance issues. In terms of tonight, the purpose of tonight's meeting is bring us all together and for you to actually meet the team, have the opportunity to hear from us and for us to provide an update as to the current situation, an overview as to the issues that we've discovered as we've started this process of assessing property by property. I said at the outset, we're not going to have all of the answers. It's not about laying blame tonight or determining where liability sits. The purpose of this is really as a touch point because we're going to need to engage with you over the coming days, weeks, months. We absolutely hear from you, and the messaging, I think, is not unique to your own about the financial pressures on people who have either built the home to reside in or to have it as a investment property or a rental property, and the pressures that puts on you financially. We're absolutely hearing that, understanding that. We are wanting to try and move forward as quickly as possible, and I did say that we are committed to working with you, not against you. We are looking at what all possible options might be, and we are wanting to ensure that we have the appropriate detail for those so that we can come back to you and can have conversations with you.
I had a general comment about the geotech, because obviously the big cut at the back is, one of the big concerns and things that have caused delays on the whole project from the beginning with Bella Vista. There have been, my understanding, I could be wrong, there have been multiple geotech reports, including my understanding is Bella Vista started and did some of the initial site works without council permission. And there have been geotech reports. So now, you can't answer this question, but I suppose I want to address it more. You can pass it on to the geotech person. Where's the competency of the prior geotech reports that have allowed other things to continue? Why can he identify an issue that's stopping things and saying it's urgent and really it's over steep and things like that it wasn't picked up before any building began on the site? So you can't answer that tonight, but we'd like to know the answer to that sort of question.
Just to respond to that, I am sounding like a broken record and I don't want to do that, but tonight's not about blame, liability, where that sits, but certainly we are going to be ensuring that we cover all of that off as we gather the information to be able to move forward. Our primary focus is on your safety, you and your families, and the safety of you and your homes. That's our number one focus. Secondly, we want to ensure that we can work with you to achieve a solution that is satisfactory to you and that we can partner with you. So we are committed to keeping you fully informed, and part of that process will be, I'm sure, engaging with you and sharing with you information as we are better informed and able to do that.
Thank you, Kirsty. Bruce Cameron's my name. I'm an engineer that's been advising a few of the landowners here. So I just got a couple of queries, actually. And it relates to, I guess, the safety or security of the advice that you received on Friday. And I guess it's two related to the two parts, the structural and also the geotechnical. In reading the advice that you've actually received on the structural side, it could be, I guess, a logical conclusion that any uncompleted building is in fact a hazardous or dangerous building under the Building Act, and I guess why you choose these particular properties to address that on when there's hundreds of uncompleted buildings around that would equally be uncompleted and therefore not meet the Building Act requirements. So the safety of the advice that you've received there, and also in regards to the geotechnical nature, and I guess it leads to the question that's just been raised, given the involvement of the geotechnical engineer that you've received advice from and the prior, you could say, tainted nature of that's resulted in this problem, particularly with Bella Vista, I guess the security and safety of the advice that you've received?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. And in relation to the advice that Council received, the structural advice that Council received on Friday morning, so that advice was that there was danger and immediate danger in respect of 3 incomplete dwellings, and that advice was needing to be responded to and acted on with urgency in advance of the cyclone warnings that were or cyclone event that was forecast to occur in the Bay of Plenty, predicted to hit on Monday. The issues that Colin has spoken to and covered off for you talk to the concern that the roofs of those dwellings could lift in high winds. Council absolutely acted cautiously because safety to people was the number one concern. With regard to allegations made about the involvement of geotechnical engineers and tainting of advice, I don't know the specifics of what you're alleging, Bruce, but I don't think that this is the forum to have that conversation, and I suggest that that be followed up so that I can better understand what it is that you're alluding to.
So I've got a question. You've closed the site down due to danger, due to the weather. So why are these people still out of their homes for the next 2 weeks? Because we do not have a cyclone on the way. So if the weather, which was one of the reasons that you close it down, is now not an issue, then why can't these people move to their homes? Surely you can do your review while they're still in their homes, or are you saying that the site is still unsafe? Because you've not made that very clear, because I'm sort of getting a bit of an oxymoronic type situation going on here. We have a notice to fix, which we can't do because we can't get on site, and you're saying you're working with us, but then how can we actually do what we want to do to get our retaining people on site to actually fix the situation when we can't even get on site?
Respond to the question, please. So the question that you asked, or you made a reference to these people being out of their homes for 2 weeks. We haven't said that the people are going to be out of their homes for 2 weeks. The evacuation advice that we provided on Friday afternoon was that people needed to be prepared to be away from their homes for over a week, and that until the cyclone event had passed and assessments could be undertaken on the properties to satisfy council that the properties are safe for owners and occupiers to return to. What I've said to you tonight and what the experts have spoken to is that we've had experts on site today and there are further experts to visit site tomorrow. Once that's happened and those assessments have been undertaken, then we will be better informed to be able to determine what the timeframes are for people being out of their homes. I also signalled that it was quite possible that this would be property by property, that there may be a variation in timeframes, but at no point have we said that people will be out of their homes for 2 weeks. What I did say was that we had accommodation arranged so that we didn't need to be uprooting people needlessly, and if need be, we had accommodation through until next week.
So apart from Damien and Jenny, who've been there the longest in that area, my family have been living at the top of that slope the longest, so a year. Our other 2 neighbours have been there 7 to 8 months or more. So I've been looking at that slope daily. I'm not a geotech engineer, but what I have always felt is that my family has been safe. But with all this information that we've been given now, what concerns me is that I want to know then how long is it going to be before that retaining wall gets in, and I think that's what we're all thinking, because it seems common sense that that is the way to be safe. Today, my wife, she was given access to our place just to do a couple of things, and somebody said to her while she was on site, if I was you, I wouldn't park there. My wife and my child have been parking the car at the end of the driveway, and when I hear someone say that worries me. I don't care if I lose my whole house, but I don't want to lose my family. But I have felt safe being there because I have not seen anything fall away. And can we just get some reassurance that the retaining wall is going to be built soon? Because I know I was asking Leon just earlier how long it's been since he's had the clearance from WorkSafe to be able to get to the back of those properties and start that wall. And it's been 2 weeks ago. So are you able to say if that wall can be started soon, or is that something that you'll still need to find out more information about?
Yeah, so sounding like a broken record, but yes, we are still information gathering, and that WorkSafe notice, that prohibition notice, still remains in place. So we are in communication with WorkSafe, but at the moment that remains in force. So absolutely, we require completion of the cataloguing. We require the structural and geotechnical advice to be provided to us, so that we can then fully assess the options that might be available in terms of moving forward, and that we can further engage with you.
Yeah, hi Kirsty, Leon Bear, Peer Retaining. We actually have approval from WorkSafe to go on site. We've met all of the requirements. We have it in writing. I'm more than happy to sit down with you guys and work through a program to help these people. Like everyone, we're flat out, but this is an emergency situation, and I'm more than happy to pull teams off other jobs to get in. It's not a difficult job, it's just complex. But like I said, I'm more than happy to sit down and work with you guys on this, but we do have permission to go on there.
So thank you for that contribution. So just the reference I made was in relation to the prohibition notice issued by WorkSafe, and I acknowledge that you may have permission, but that notice remains in force as at this point in time. We absolutely want to work with owners, residents and your advisors. This today is a touch point for communication.
That original prohibition notice is the one that Leon's talking about, that has been lifted for his company to do the retaining. The retaining is ready to go. We are waiting on you, on council, to give us the go-ahead. We've done everything you've asked. You're the hold-up, not us.
Okay, so what I just convey to you, and I don't wish to get into he said, she said, but that when council was requiring the emergency works on the 19th and 20th of February, and again on Friday, we had to liaise with WorkSafe because we needed to ensure that the work we were undertaking did not contravene the prohibition notice that remained in force. So I can't talk to the permissions that you've been given. So
Leon,
thank you for that.
Leon, we'll make contact with you tomorrow to talk through, what you offer and the documentation that you've got. Okay. How many more questions have people got? Okay. Yep.
Manager, so I haven't fully experienced it, but I imagine what you're all going through. I just wanted to know, is it going to be possible at all for, obviously my tenants would like to leave, Is it going to be possible at all for them to get in there and move out, or get a moving truck, or?
So that question has been asked of us, and as we've said during the course of the evening, that we're going to have experts on site tomorrow to undertake further assessment. Question was asked as to whether tenants could vacate over the weekend, and we'll need the outcome of that site visit tomorrow, and it may be that we can agree to that happening, but with supervision from an engineering expert whilst that move happens.
Can I just ask, just I know there's quite a few people wanting to know this. Some of us, we've been living in our houses for a long time. And some of us want to know if some people wanted to actually move back to their houses, can they actually do that? Do you guys actually have a legal right to say no?
So we have issued, the Chief Executive has issued a warrant which prohibits entry, and there are notices that have been erected on fencing which advises that there is a financial penalty that can be approached, and that has a cap, a daily penalty with a cap of up to $200,000. Now obviously we don't want to be in a position where we're having to act on that we want to work against you. So look, we're doing our absolute best to work with you to ensure that we can determine the safety of your homes and provide certainty for you as soon as possible.
Well, yeah, my name's Luke Fordham. I currently live at 309. Well, I did until Friday, but the situation we're in, we're having a bit of conflict with Barnard to unfortunately, like, we have found another place to live. But at the end of the day, if we can't access our property to get our belongings out, why are people out of it? Why are people like yourself and engineers? You know, I've been building it for 12 years, and I've driven past that. I've built houses, hundreds of houses. I've worked down in Christchurch for 4 or 5 years, earthquake repairs on these houses. But if you guys are going on site, why can't we access our belongings? You know, as the law states that no one can withhold us from getting our belongings, we just want out. You know, we got lives to live, we got
So
bills to pay.
thank you, Luke. I've spoken with you and also your fellow tenant.
Yeah,
who
no,
isn't here.
that's fair enough. But like, we having conflict with Barnard.
Okay, can
you
I
know,
just...
and that, I mean, we don't want conflict. We just want like, that's all we want. We've been living.
Can I respond? I can talk to the access issues. I can't talk to your tenancy issues.
Yeah.
In terms of the access issues, so what we've said is that we work with you, with the security personnel on site, to enable people to go back to homes to retrieve belongings. When I was contacted and asked whether we would allow a removal truck to be stationed at your property over the entire weekend, I said I would need to take expert advice on that as to what risk that would pose. And the advice that I received was that we needed to firstly undertake the assessments that are required to be undertaken today and tomorrow. And secondly, if we were to enable a removal truck to be on site, that it was most likely that we would need to have a geotechnical engineer positioned on site to assist with that relocation.
But this meeting, we probably came to the meeting knowing probably a good 90% of what you're going to say. So to be fair, you bring all these people in here for wasting your time, and we knew all the stuff you were going to say. They want answers, so you're saying we've been living in a situation where it's been unsafe for how long? And now you guys taking a step, so we've been living in building sites for pretty much, we got code of compliance on the house, right? So we've been living on the building site, construction site, that's pretty unsafe to live on, we got one in the back of us, that's just sitting there doing nothing. You can put the blame on Bella Vista, but when are you guys going to step up? I deal with you guys every single day, and I'm sick of you guys just coming in and expecting that you guys can just walk us. I'm a licensed building practitioner, and then you guys just walk all over us. We got like 15 plans coming out of council stamped. You guys come on site bail us. You know, like, how do you know all these people's homes are safe? As a covenant JID board, you pointed out bolts that are missing. You know, you got this guy here. How do you know his bolts aren't in the timber floor?
Can I respond
You have no
question?
record. You have no record of that. So they're living in a house that they're unsure it's been safe, like it's not safe, and you're showing us bolts that are missing from these three houses, right? You know, a bit of JID cover over, who cares? You know, you've got people living in there, it's structural. And these bolts, these steel portals in these houses are holding up the house.
So what we're saying is we don't know, and we need.
You don't know anything, that's your problem. We come in here and speaking for an answer, and look, you don't know anything.
The purpose of today was to inform you of where we're at, and yours. Yes, we are. We are 2 weeks away. Hey, politeness was what we asked for. What I'm saying, okay, is that we have outlined to you, we're doing an assessment of every property, okay, so we know what is required to get code compliance. We have outlined that that exercise, we estimate, will take another 2 weeks, okay, and then we'll be able to have an informed discussion about what work is necessary to rectify properties and deficiencies. In respect of some of the issues that we have uncovered during our work to date, you are correct. There is some issues that we need to think through how we manage those issues, and you've identified some of them. But the purpose of today was to make sure everyone was informed about where we're at. We have been completely open and transparent with you. The reports on which we made our decision on Friday have been provided to you. We've given you a very open and honest assessment of where we currently are at, okay? And we have been honest in saying we have not got all the answers now. Here's where we are at in terms of the process, and we are working towards being able to have a resolution, because if I go back to the start, our two objectives here are to keep owners and residents safe and to get owners and residents into code compliant homes in the future. That is what's driving us. Sorry?
We are in a code compliant house.
You know, like, I hate to say it, you've had all of these experts, and then we're ratepayers, and you're going to get more experts to confeat the other experts. You guys don't hold a bag of sand. I don't trust any words that you got. That code of compliance, throw in the air.
Might as well just be dust. It doesn't mean anything. What does that mean anymore? We've got code of compliance, and you're more or less telling us that our ground around our house is unsafe that we're living in. It's not fair. Trying to help us, you're making us worse.
Well, we're not setting out to do that, and you know, we're very conscious of the fact that of the situation that you face.
Movement forward in communication can be directed as a group, as we have done tonight, because I strongly believe as a whole we have moved forward with this, with the support of each other, and I strongly believe that with us moving forward we should be all aware of
I think that's a really good point, Andre, and that we've had some difficulty with communications. Now, when you signed in, I think you've been asked to provide contact details or identify your property. So we've had trouble with some of the email addresses that we've sent things to haven't been correct. So it would be really helpful when you leave the building if you can check that sign-in sheet and put your preferred method of communication, a contact phone number and email address, so that we can make sure we've got everyone who's attended tonight captured, please.
One thing that's definitely come from this is the community around that area has definitely strengthened the support of the locals and obviously us as homeowners as well. And moving forward, I mean, we've had to come across and look at these situations, go, how do we move forward, how do we work together? And I really feel that from the council's point of view, I think we would all probably be in the same position where if there are any answers, we would all like to hear them together and be able to make this decision together forward.
Speaking your experts, but can we have a peer review on some of the decisions that come through? Because I mean, I'm getting conflicting information from experts that are around me, and the experts report that it's been very
some of the situations that you've been telling us that we're actually dealing with an emergency aren't there anymore, and that's what I've sort of reiterated before. But I'm getting, as I said, once again, conflicting information, because I mean we've got two very upset people in the room wondering if they're living in a safe house. I've literally just asked these guys around me who are experts in their fields, are we in an unsafe situation? They've both said no.
Okay. Thank you for that, and we'll look into the issue that you've raised. So this is the last question for the night, because I'm conscious of the time. Yeah.
The doctor rises. Last night, and without going into details for everybody, although my immediate neighbors are all too familiar, I'm suffering from rather significant cardiac issues. Last night I had an event. You guys put us out of the way of the cyclone in a third-floor penthouse apartment on Ocean Beach. Now, all night long, the winds raged because it's Ocean Beach Road. So when my BP hit 200 plus, and I had to make a decision, I self-medicated because I know how. Today, my doctor has written you a note saying I need bed rest, not 2 weeks from now, and not in a strange environment, and not without my medications and equipment. I need that bed rest now, and I would like to have it in my home, where I have been living for 10 months. Is there some, and by the way, Christy told me when we met that under no circumstances would the $200,000 fine ever be thrust at us, that she didn't think that was at all likely to happen. Now we're finding new papers stapled to our properties saying, guess what? If you actually use the property, there's going to be a $200,000 fine. Faced with 73 years of age, I think I need to go home.
Sir, as we've said, tomorrow people will be on site, and we should have an answer as to whether or not you can go home tomorrow or sometime during this week. We'll have an answer to that question. If your current accommodation arrangements are not suitable for you, and it sounds as though you're describing arrangements that are not suitable, if you make contact with Kirsty, she will get the team that's in charge of accommodation for owners and residents to address your needs so that as best we can meet your health needs in the immediate future. So in bringing this meeting to a close, I would like to thank you all for your attendance. I know and understand that what we've talked about this evening is a pretty charged and emotional situation, and we empathise with you. Where someone said today, you know, that they're not kind of impervious to understanding the issues that we face, and we understand and empathise with the situation that you're in, and we are trying to do our best to get as quick as possible resolution to the issues you face. As Kirsty has said, you know, we are resourcing this team so there is no hold up in terms of for lack of resource. And you've reinforced tonight, and I have heard, the Mayor has heard, and Councillor Baldock has heard the need for urgency. And we will respond to that, but we need to make sure that whatever we come up with is fixed right this time. We do not want any kind of issues that do not provide a solution which is ongoing and lasting. So once again, thank you for your attendance, and given the incredible pressure and stress that you're under, thank you for having a civil and hopefully for you a productive discussion, and we will make sure that we keep you informed and we work to keep you safe and this issue resolved. So thank you and good evening.